So, hello and welcome to the Assay. Today I'm here with Sandeep Pai, Director for Research and Strategy at Swaniti Initiative. So, Sandeep, thanks for joining us here at the Assay again.
Thanks for having me again, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Amy.
Absolutely. It's always great to be able to catch up. So, for those of our readers who didn't see your last interview, maybe you can start by giving us a bit of background to your professional experience and then also your work with Swaniti Initiative.
Yeah, I have dabbled in many different fields over the years, and now I like to call myself like a interdisciplinary climate and energy expert. Interdisciplinary in true sense because for a while I was a journalist, then I was an academic, and now I work in the think tank space. I have also been an engineer long time ago. So, working across different fields to try and solve the climate crisis is one of the key focus areas of my work. Uh, Currently, I have been working with Swaniti Initiative, which is a nonprofit working around the world on climate issues. We work on the ground, we work at a diplomatic level, so very local to global focus that I and the team members and everybody else in Swaniti has. What we do primarily is research, and through research, we engage with policymakers to try and make them compel them to take bold climate action. Some of the areas of our work might be very interesting for especially your audience. So we work on four areas primarily. One is around methane initiative, where we work in global south countries to see if they can have ambitious methane pledges, whether there is opportunity to mitigate methane, especially in the energy sector, not necessarily in the waste and ag sector, but coal, oil, and gas sectors. The second initiative is around critical mineral development. And we have partnered with two other organizations to launch the Council for Critical Mineral Development in Global South. And we're trying to bring together Global South countries to leverage their collective strength for making sure that they have a big role in creating value chains for critical minerals such as lithium, cobalt, copper, etc. The third initiative is around just energy transition, where this has been a focus of my personal work for a very long time, where we look at how countries can phase out fossil fuels, and when they do, how do we make sure that workers, communities, and regions that host these fossil fuels also have a role in the new clean energy economy, and so work on topics like economic diversification, skilling, etc. for local workers. The last and the final initiative is around role of state-owned companies. So, globally, like over half of fossil fuels are produced by state-owned companies, and we are trying to work with several of them on their business diversification strategy. So how can a coal mining company like Coal India diversify into critical minerals and solar? How can other companies, power companies, get into more cleaner sectors? So that has been the large focus of this work. And we do that primarily, just to sum up, through like in-depth research, but at the same time engaging with the key stakeholders. So yeah, that's been the focus. That's my need.
All right, sounds great. I mean, I kind of want to touch on a bunch of these different initiatives that you're doing within the group. So maybe we can start by looking at some of the key energy transition initiatives taking place across the global south. So, what are you seeing and what has been their impact so far?
I mean, several. So let's divide this question into two parts. The first part is all the initiatives that are happening around clean energy, so renewables. So almost every country, like I can't think of a country that is not embracing renewables. Like some more faster than others, but everybody is moving towards a clean energy transition. I think if anybody is thinking that it is not happening. I think they're living in a fool's paradise. One can argue about this, the pace, the scale, all of that. So one big trend is the world and global south is moving towards clean energy. But it the scale and the speed is varying across countries depending on where they are in the arc of transition. So some countries in the global south are more ambitious because they don't have alternate sources. They want to provide energy access. Some are, while continuing to keep their fossil fuels, also adding renewables in the mix. So that is a clear trend that every country wants to move towards renewables. The second in that same bucket is around critical minerals. Like every big major country wants to secure critical minerals for their clean energy transition because it is important so that they can secure their supplies, they can secure their value chains, they can create jobs locally. So those are some initiatives. So, on the clean energy side, there is massive deployment happening. Of course, it is not enough. It is not compatible with the climate targets that are required globally. But nonetheless, there is a clear. In some countries where fossil fuels are aging, you know, uh, they have governments that are more wanting to be more ambitious. They are also working on the fossil fuel side. For example, South Africa. In South Africa, there's a clear pathway, or there is a planned, or there's a clear interest, not a pathway, to, in the long run, move away from fossil fuels and deploy renewables at scale. Um, Even in countries like India, where fossil fuels are still growing, the growth has come down. The percentages have come down. Like without renewables, this growth would have been even higher and more massive. So in some cases, the growth itself has come down, and in other cases, there's a clear pathway or an end date. But all in all, one of the biggest thing is that almost every country has embraced the net zero idea. That again, the timelines vary, but some have declared for 2050, some have declared for 2070, but countries are moving towards that. Now, last point I'll just add is again, implementation matters, and some are better than others in terms of implementation. So that also makes a huge difference.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you started to touch on kind of the critical minerals aspect of it. And so we all know that there is just an immense amount of new raw materials that are needed to enter the global supply chain to help kind of with this transition. Are there opportunities here in terms of like exploration, mining for countries in the global south?
For sure. So, I mean, if you look at today's value chains, it is predominantly dominated by China. China, whether it's producing some of the minerals it produces in the country, some it has access to, it has bought leases long, long time ago, but it's also most importantly processing them. So the midstream. So it is dominating in the upstream, which is the mining part. It's also dominating in the midstream, which is processing, and it is definitely dominating in the downstream. So today, China dominates. It has a large share of the critical mineral value chain, but the West has woken up to a very dominant China in the critical minerals value chain. And in the last few years, there's been massive efforts to actually reshape some of those critical mineral value chains or and increase their share. So US has passed several legislations. EU has passed legislations like the Raw Material Act, where it is really about securing value chains. It has both the Western countries are going in Africa and other countries to try and secure their own mines. Now, in this race between the two elephants, global South countries will be left out if they don't come together on this very, very important topic. I mean, their collective strength is the only way, in my opinion, and I'll go ahead and say that for them to actually secure value chains. and not become mere raw material exporters for these big elephants. So I think in that vein, I think if global South countries come together, do joint, messaging, joint help support each other in favorable trade policies, do exploration because there's dearth of exploration data, come together and do exploration, work on alternate technologies like recycling, whether it's coal waste to critical minerals, whether it's other forms of rocks to critical minerals. I think these are some great opportunities for global South countries to come together. We at Swaniti and with partners SE for All, Sustainable Energy for All, and University of California, Davis, we have launched an initiative called the Council for Critical Mineral Development in Global South. And the whole idea is to bring together Global South countries so that they can work together to be part of the value chain, which is a $2 trillion opportunity. And if they don't, again, I will repeat this: if they don't come together, there's a large fear that they will become mere raw material exporters, and the whole economic and jobs benefit will go somewhere else, while they will just be stuck with mining. So yeah, I think it's an important area of lots of future work in Global South.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think a big part of growing kind of this more equitable metals value chain is to keep, people are looking at keeping the refining and more end use processes in a domestic sphere. So, are there opportunities here growing in terms of like the refining and the end use industrial nature of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the critical minerals, if you see, they are located in Global South. So it does not make sense. I mean, although it is how it's happening right now, it makes total sense to have the refining and the processing in the country where it's produced or nearby countries. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but it's not easy because the value chains are already set. The skill required, the people, the skill required to do some of that processing, the demand centers are somewhere else. But I think, as I was saying, like if global South countries come together and jointly invest in some of these, imagine a DRC where, which is producing cobalt. Now, if a DRC and a few other global South countries come together, jointly invest in refining, then they will be able to attract investments as well. Like, they'll be able to access capital. Imagine now they come together with other countries or same set of countries also have to get like skilled workforce, because these are very technical and highly, refined processes. So you need high skilled people. But I think I think I'm very convinced that at this point, if countries don't come together in the global South, it's going to be very difficult for them to actually make a big intervention in getting their slice of the value chain.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's definitely a good message in terms of working together. So my final question is really just kind of touching on one of the other initiatives that you spoke about early on is, and looking at a just transition. So I thought maybe we could end off looking at, why is maybe you can define it for our readers or listeners who might not know exactly what it is, and why it's so important to focus our efforts on a just transition for the global South.
Yeah, so I mean, I will start by saying that just transition means very different things to very different people. The traditional meaning of just transition, when it started with the labor movement in 70s in North America, was that when you close down anything, when you close down any industry, you want to make sure that workers and communities, employment and jobs and all of that are protected. As from the 1970s to 2024, as this concept evolved and entered the climate space, it became, everybody started using it in different ways. So you will have indigenous groups talking about just transition in terms of indigenous rights. You will have some other groups talking about just transition, about very specific context and very specific set of workers. But I think the way I think about it is somewhere in between, which is when you transition away from fossil fuels or EVs or any other form of sort of like transition to EVs from ICE engines or make transitions in the steel sector, you want to make sure that the whole community, not just those individual workers who may lose employment, but the whole community and the region is taken care of, because dependency on these natural resources varies vastly. They range from jobs, direct, indirect, induced jobs, to things like revenue generation, taxes, etc., to consumers who consume some of these raw materials. So you want to make sure that the whole ecosystem is taken care of as you move. Now, why is this important? It is important for two reasons. The first reason is political. We will not be able to do energy transition without taking care of large number of people and communities who may be impacted, negatively impacted by transition. I mean, you have so many examples around the world of, countries getting divided along political lines, where one will support the continuation of fossil fuel industries to protect jobs, or that's at least that's the stated objective publicly, and the other side saying like, we are going to do just transition for you. So from a political economy point of view, it's very, very important to take care of workers, communities, and regions. But there is a whole justice angle. The original idea of why just transition matters is like, you don't want an inequitable world. You're moving to a climate, you're addressing climate change, but when you do that, you don't want to create more inequalities. You don't want to create more social problems as you do that. So there's a very important political and a very important justice argument of why just transition matters. The work on just transition used to be very problem focused. So defining what just transition means, who will be impacted, when they will be impacted, where they will be impacted, how much money is required to train them, that kind of work. But in the last 2 years, it has really shifted to a solutions focused, which is thinking about like, how do you diversify the economy of that particular region? How do you diversify West Virginia? How do you diversify Jharkhand in India? How do you diversify Pumalanga in South Africa? And large studies are coming out, frameworks are coming out, thinking about how to diversify. And when you diversify, what new skills are required? So there's a lot of initiatives happening around skilling and so on and so forth. So all in all, I think we have moved in the just transition space from a very problem-focused, argument to a more solutions-focused practice, which I think is a very positive development.
Yes, absolutely. I think, moving forward and finding ways to, move forward with things is the way to go. Anyway, those were all the questions that I had for you today, Sandeep, but I really want to thank you for joining us here at the Assay.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.